Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. They will awake and sing, dwellers of the dust. Hello everybody, this is Gilgamesh, and this is the second half of Isaiah chapter 26. We're going to go covering verses 13 through 21 in this video. We addressed the first half of the chapter in my last video, but I divided it in two because it's kind of a long section, and possibly it divides here anyway. What follows doesn't seem entirely related to the first half of the chapter. So starting in verse 13 here, O Lord our God, other lords had mastery over us, apart from you. Only in you we bring to remembrance your name. It says here, had mastery. The verb here is the word Baal as a verb, the same word from which we get the pagan god Baal. It's sometimes used as a synonym with Adonai, which also means master. And here we have Adonim as the subject of this sentence. It's a plural of Adon, which means master or lord. And so we're using both Adon and Baal in this sentence here to indicate not the true God, but pagan gods, that other lords, other pagan gods had mastery over them that were not the Lord himself. But then it ends it here with this idea that only in the Lord, the actual Lord, will we have the ability to bring remembrance to his name. These same two words, remembrance and name, occurred back in verse 8. Here they show up again, but in a reversed order. The word Adon is usually more master in the sense of a title, one who is in charge, where the word Baal is more the master in the sense of having mastered a skill and has a bit more of a sense of domination that we see in the verb here. Now, speaking of these false gods, we come into verse 14 and we say, dead, they will not live. Shades, they will not arise. This line really only makes sense if we understand it as referring to the pagan gods, because it's going to be contradicted just a few verses later. And here we're saying that these pagan gods actually cannot come back from the dead. In fact, we call them not just dead, but we call them shades. The word here is Raphaim, and it is a term that we have looked at before, particularly those who were in the pit, who mocked the king of Babylon as he fell, back in chapter 14. This verse is setting up for us a contrast for what we will see in verse 19. To that end, you visited and destroyed them, and wiped out all remembrance of them. Now, the Dead Sea Scrolls actually, rather than wiped out, has a verb here which means to bind. You bound all remembrance of them. I don't know that that makes a lot of difference, but the idea here is that the Lord would come and wipe out and destroy all the false gods. Then we have verse 15. You have increased the nation, O Lord. You have increased the nation. You are glorified. You have enlarged all the borders of the land. So we have this three-line section here with the first two lines having a direct repetition about increasing the nation. And it does remind us a little bit of Isaiah chapter 9, where it talks about, thou hast multiplied the nation. And perhaps this is a callback to that. But the idea is that the nation has gotten bigger. And the question is, how has it gotten bigger? Generally, to increase the nation or multiply the nation, we're talking about an increase in population or an increase in territory. And it tells us here, speaking, we assume, about the nation, O Lord, in distress they sought you. They poured out a whispered prayer, your chastisement to them. Well, first let's say that some manuscripts have we sought you rather than they sought you, as well as the final line of this being to us rather than to them. Unfortunately, everything between those words is a little bit confused and nobody quite agrees on what it means. we have here the idea of they poured out a whispered prayer. This whole line is opaque in the Hebrew, and hence any translation is largely just a guess. The phrase here, tzakun lachash, is rendered as a whispered prayer. And it's particularly obscure, although in later Hebrew it does become frequently invoked as an idiom in the sense of a heartfelt whispered prayer. Given the context that comes before, talking about enlarging the nation, and what follows with talking about the woman in childbirth in distress, I think that the sense of this section has to be that they cried out in distress and were delivered. For that reason, I think the word that is translated as your chastisement might be the most suspect in this section here. Now, this word notably is the same word that we will see later in Isaiah chapter 53, verse 5, where it says, the chastisement of your peace was upon him, in one of the famous suffering servant songs. There, the matter is of the servant being beaten or chastised for crimes that were committed by others. So perhaps your chastisement might not be understood as a beating given out by the Lord, but one that perhaps was received. That's just a guess, and it remains difficult to make sense of here. What exactly are they pouring out here with this whispered prayer? The word here, tsuk, is what is translated as poured out. Also can mean melt. There is another word, a homonym, that means to be in distress, and maybe that's the right word here. The term lachash elsewhere refers to an incantation in Isaiah 3:3, as well as in Jeremiah 8:17 and Ecclesiastes 10:11. It also shows up in Isaiah 3:20, referring to an amulet. So this is a word that means incantation or amulet, and we're stretching it here a little bit to make it say prayer. And it's possible this refers to ritualistic prayers or to magical incantations used to ward off evil. We're not really sure what the sense is here. This is not the normal word for prayer. So they poured out, or they were possibly in distress, and they had this whispered prayer or muttered incantation, and then your chastisement to them. It's really a challenging verse to make sense out of, and a lot of translations take it in a lot of different directions. But we know before it, we're talking about the nation becoming larger, and that this line here, that they were in distress and they sought you. So we have the idea definitely that they were in distress, they were seeking the Lord, and then something happens here. Maybe they offered a prayer, maybe they went to a magical incantation, and there's something about a chastisement, although it's not clear what your chastisement means, if it was something the Lord gave out or something that the Lord experienced. But we move on to verse 17. 17 says, like a pregnant woman, she draws near to giving birth. She writhes. She cries out in her pangs. Thus are we from before your face, Lord. We were pregnant. We writhed, as though we had given birth. Spirit of salvations, we had not made earth, and they have not fallen, the inhabitants of the world. So that last bit's a little confusing, but let's start at the part here with the woman with child drawing near and giving birth here. These sort of illustrate the tendency in biblical poetry to produce a little miniature narrative and to form a story of words, if you will. And so we have this idea of a woman that is giving birth, and we have the very repetitive, she draws near, she writhes, she cries out. We're getting a very strong image of what's happening with this woman who is in the birth pains here. And then it explains that we are the pregnant woman. We are the ones who are giving birth. And this is how we feel before your face, O Lord. Now, that might mean a temple setting. Sometimes when you say before the face of the Lord, you're talking about being in the temple. It might also mean that just with the Lord looking upon us, we feel this writhing pain. But it says that we were pregnant and we writhed as though we had given birth. And then some translations put the next word, which means either spirit or breath or wind, up with the previous line to say we had given birth to wind, meaning that we hadn't yielded anything, possibly even something else around breaking wind or something. But I don't think that's where it actually goes. I think it goes in the next one, in the next line here, because the next word is this plural salvations. So spirit of salvations or wind of salvations, breath of salvations, a wind, a saving wind. And then it says, we have not made earth. It's possible saying that they have not created the earth, that is what God has done. But it's also saying that they may not have made this spirit of salvations for the earth. They haven't brought this deliverance to the world. And then it also says, they have not fallen, the inhabitants of the world. I think the inhabitants of the world represents the wicked, and where it simply says earth, even though it doesn't say inhabitants of earth, I think that may be the people that are righteous that they are trying to save. So they have not made deliverance for the earth, and the wicked, the inhabitants of the world, have not been brought down, have not fallen. I think that's what we're talking about here. Isaiah loves to talk about women giving birth. He's a father, and perhaps he has a lot of firsthand experience of what this is like. I think, though, that this is more the correct translation here, that we writhed as though we had given birth, and that this idea of ruach, which is spirit or breath or wind, belongs with the next word, which is salvations. And that this saving wind has not been made for the earth. Then we come to 19 and one of the most spectacular verses in Isaiah. Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. They will awake and sing, dwellers of the dust. This entire line of poetry just simply contradicts verse 14, which says that the dead shall not live. The distinction here is the word your dead shall live. The idea of the doctrine of the resurrection of the dead, some feel it does not emerge until the book of Daniel. I think this verse clearly goes against that. This seems to clearly be talking about resurrection, and it's talking about here that your community, your people will rise again. The dead that would not rise seems to be referring specifically to the other lords who have had mastery over them, that those will not live. And this goes back to the idea of the false gods are actually ungods. They're non-entities, that there's no way they can live because they're not real. They're not, they have no actual power. And I think this goes with them being the Raphaim as well, these powerful ones of Sheol, that they cannot rise from the dust. But your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. Now, their bodies, the Masoretic text has my body, my corpse, but two ancient versions, the Syriac and the Targum, both show that it is their corpses. And this is the more likely reading, I think, especially since the verb that follows it for arise is a plural third person and not a singular. So it doesn't make a lot of sense with my body, but their bodies shall rise then agrees with a verb that follows it if we take the reading from the Targum or the Syriac, which seems to be the more correct thing here. And that also fits more nicely as a parallel to the line before it with your dead. Then we have the interesting statement, for your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. And so we have this birth imagery again we've come back to. So why did we talk about that a woman travailing that is wanting to end the process here and actually deliver the child? We've now switched from that being the woman to being us to now being the earth. that this is a birthing process, a new birth for the dead, that the earth itself will give birth to the dead. And it has this interesting imagery of your dew is a dew of light. Well, dew is sort of this natural irrigation system that the land of Israel was very dependent upon, is the natural dews. And so it probably has some natural associations with bringing things to life, the greenery, the revivification. Although the word light here might actually refer to a plant, Malva rotundifolia, or round leaf mallow, or also called a low mallow, or a small mallow, or a dwarf mallow. This little plant, I don't know what significance it would hold if the word actually refers to it, but that is another possible reading of the word that's translated as light here. The plant got that name because it is light sensitive, apparently. I am not a botanist, but it either refers to the dew of light or the dew of this mallow plant, and I don't know what significance the mallow plant would hold there. But we have this idea of revivification. We have the idea of the earth giving birth to the dead so they come back to life. So we come back to, how are we multiplying or increasing the nation? Here it is. We have the dead coming back to life to fill the nation. And this is emphasized in the next verse here. Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the curse is passed by. There's a lot of Passover imagery in that. The idea that the people will enter into their chambers and shut the door behind them so that the destruction can pass by on the outside. And we go to verse 21, for behold, the Lord is coming out from his place to visit the sin of the inhabitants of the earth upon him. And the earth will disclose her blood, and will no more cover her slain. So now, instead of giving birth to the dead, the earth is also going to disclose the blood, or perhaps blood guilt might be a better term to use here. Because when it talks about this, it's talking about that when the just are destroyed, are killed, their blood will cry out from the earth and pollute the earth. And so the earth is going to disclose the blood of those who have been slain and murdered, and will no longer cover it up. So even though the blood might have been buried to keep it out of sight, the earth will put the blood back out to stand as a witness to those who have slain the righteous. And so we have this idea that the earth is going to disclose her blood, and those who have harmed others will be made known. And that's Isaiah chapter 26. It's a fascinating chapter. It brings to focus the idea of dead living again, something that we hit on in the previous chapter. Now comes about explicitly again, that their bodies will rise up and awake and sing for joy. That is all here in this chapter, and it gives us a marvelous look here on this apocalypse of Isaiah. And so I will see you in the next one on chapter 27. Thank you, and don't forget to like and subscribe.